The morning began with a quiet that didn't feel peaceful at all. The penthouse always carried a coldness, but today it felt sharper, like the walls themselves were warning her. Alea wrapped her soft blue shawl around her shoulders, the fabric warm against her skin as she rested one hand on her belly. 7 months along, her baby moved gently, unaware of the tension floating in the air. She held the bank documents in her other hand, her fingers trembling even though she kept telling herself to stay calm. They needed to discuss the loan renewal, and she hoped, desperately, that this morning would be different. That maybe he would listen. But Zayden was already at the dining table, staring at his untouched breakfast as if it had personally offended him. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff beneath his expensive suit. The moment she approached, he didn't even look at her. His voice cut through the room with a sharp snap, irritation dripping from every syllable. She took a slow breath and stepped closer, trying to speak gently, hoping softness could cover the cracks in their life. He barely let her finish a sentence before slicing through her words. The air thickened, heavy and grey, like storm clouds rolling over still water. She held the documents tighter, willing herself not to shake. This was supposed to be a normal morning. Calm. Steady. Predictable. But as Zayden pushed his chair back with a harsh scrape, she understood something was shifting, unraveling, breaking apart in ways she could no longer ignore. The cracks hadn't appeared overnight. They had been growing for months, maybe years, like thin lines spreading across fragile glass. Once, Zayden had been charming in a polished, carefully controlled way. His smile felt like something real, something warm, something she could trust. But the more success he gained, the more that warmth evaporated, leaving only cold ambition behind. Flashbacks flickered in her mind, each one a small bruise on the heart. The slammed door when she told him she was pregnant. The muttered insults when she asked him to come home earlier. The way he looked at her as if her changing body was an inconvenience rather than a miracle. He used to bring her flowers. Now he brought accusations. He used to listen. Now he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. She kept telling herself that things would get better after the baby arrived, that maybe fatherhood would soften the hardness creeping into him. Instead, the resentment deepened. Every time she mentioned a doctor's appointment, he rolled his eyes. Every time she needed help, he claimed he was too busy. She hid the emotional bruises behind tired smiles, wanting to protect her child from growing in a home filled with tension. She had promised herself she would try until she had nothing left to give. But standing in the hallway, watching him slam another door as she touched her belly protectively, she realized her hope was wearing thin, fading like old film burning under too much light. The drive to the bank felt heavier than usual, as if the car itself sensed the unease pulsing between them. Alea sat quietly, fingers curled around the strap of her purse while her heart thudded in an uneasy rhythm. Zayden didn't speak. He didn't even glance at her. He simply tapped the steering wheel impatiently at every red light, muttering curses under his breath like the world existed solely to irritate him. When they arrived, the bank was crowded, humming with the soft chatter of customers and the faint rustle of paper. The scent of polished wood and printer ink hit her immediately. She adjusted her shawl and stepped out slowly, one hand braced on her belly. Zayden didn't wait. He strode ahead with his long, confident steps, expecting her to keep up despite her swollen feet and tightening abdomen. "Can you slow down?" she murmured, breath slightly short. He didn't slow. He snapped over his shoulder, irritation flaring in his eyes for everyone to witness. People turned. Their glances were quick, curious, uncomfortable. Alea felt heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassment pricking her skin. She tried to ignore the sting of their whispers. She wasn't used to public scenes, but Zayden seemed to thrive on them lately. He marched straight to the manager's office as if the building belonged to him, throwing open the door without knocking. She followed behind, each step feeling more wrong than the last. Something in the air shifted, thickened, tightened. She couldn't name it, but her instincts whispered like a warning wind curling around her spine. This visit wasn't about solving a problem. It was a trap in plain sight, and she didn't realize until too late that she was walking straight into it. The moment the office door closed behind them, something inside Zayden snapped like a brittle twig. His voice rose before she even sat down, hurling accusations faster than she could process them. He blamed her for the delayed loan paperwork. He blamed her for the financial losses he claimed she didn't understand. He even blamed her pregnancy, calling it bad timing as if their child were a burden he never asked for. His words ricocheted off the glass walls, sharp and relentless, slicing through the small space like flying arrows that had nowhere to land except her heart. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it wavered like a candle struggling against wind. "Zayden, please, lower your voice," she whispered, glancing at the employees outside who had clearly begun to notice. Her plea only fueled him. He paced back and forth, hands shaking with rage, face flushed with frustration that had nothing to do with her yet landed squarely on her shoulders. Each time she opened her mouth, he cut her off with another insult. Useless. Slow. Emotional. He spat the words with such disgust that she flinched. Her dizziness worsened. The room felt smaller. The air felt thinner. Her belly tightened, a warning she tried to breathe through. She pressed a hand against the desk for balance, praying he would calm down, just for a moment. But Zayden wasn't listening to reason. He was spiraling, fueled by ego and stress, blind to the trembling woman standing in front of him. Outside, employees passed by slower than usual, glancing through the glass with uneasy curiosity. Whispering. Watching. Waiting. And Alaya felt something break inside her, something she feared could never be mended again. It happened in less than a heartbeat. One moment he was shouting, chest rising and falling like a storm trying to break free. The next, he stepped toward her, anger clouding his face. She lifted her hands instinctively, not to block him, but to calm him. To stop this from reaching a point they couldn't return from. But Zayden, blinded by frustration, shoved her aside as if she were in his way. The force wasn't monstrous, but it was enough. Far too much for a woman 7 months pregnant. Her feet slipped. Her shawl tangled around her legs. The room spun as she stumbled backward, striking the edge of the desk before collapsing onto the floor. A sharp cry tore from her throat, instinctive and raw, as pain rippled through her belly. Gasps erupted around the bank. The noise spread like wildfire. Customers froze mid-step. Employees rushed forward. A pregnant woman, curled on the polished floor, hands clutching her stomach, breaths coming out in ragged, panicked bursts. Someone shouted for help. Another reached for their phone to call emergency services. Alaya lifted her eyes, vision blurry with tears, and looked directly at Zayden. What she saw wasn't concern. It wasn't remorse. It was shock mixed with stubborn pride, twisted into something horrifying. He didn't kneel. He didn't offer a hand. He muttered something under his breath, something cruel and defensive, as if her fall was somehow her fault. Then he turned away, jaw clenched, refusing to face what he had done. But everyone else did. Everyone saw everything. And silence settled over the bank like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Heavy footsteps echoed through the stunned silence, slicing through the panic like a blade. The double doors of the bank swung open with a force that made several employees straighten instantly. Out stepped Mr. Cullodeson, the branch manager who never raised his voice yet commanded more respect than anyone else in the building. His silver hair gleamed under the ceiling lights, and his calm, measured presence steadied the room more than any alarm could. People parted for him without being asked, forming a clear path as if instinct knew better than thought. His gaze swept across the chaos until it landed on the sight that froze him mid-step. Alaya, trembling, curled on the floor. Her shawl twisted, her breaths shallow, one hand gripping her belly as though she feared it might slip away. Something inside him shifted, snapping from quiet neutrality to a cold, lethal stillness that radiated through every inch of his frame. He moved quickly but carefully, kneeling beside her with a gentleness that stood in sharp contrast to the tension choking the room. Behind him, Zayden scoffed at the approaching old man, rolling his eyes as if this interruption were nothing more than an inconvenience. A few employees exchanged horrified looks at his arrogance. They knew Zayden was foolish, but they didn't realize how foolish until this moment. Khalid didn't spare him a glance. His attention stayed on Alaya, voice low and steady as he assessed her condition. The entire bank watched, breath held, the air trembling with the weight of a truth about to break open. Khalid leaned closer, his hand steady as it checked her pulse, then rested gently on her shoulder. His voice lowered to a tone only meant for family, soft enough to soothe her trembling breath. "Alaya, look at me," he said quietly. She lifted her tear-blurred eyes, recognizing him even through the haze of pain and fear. Relief washed over her face in a fragile wave. "Uncle." "Khalid," she whispered, her voice cracking. The room seemed to freeze at that one word. "Uncle." Khalid's expression hardened, but not toward her. He turned slowly toward Zayden, who stood stiff with irritation, clueless about the depth of the storm gathering in the room. Khalid rose to his full height, calm in a way that made the air vibrate with danger. When he spoke, his voice carried through the entire bank. "Stand back," he said, each syllable precise and sharp. "She is my blood." Gasps rippled across the floor like a shockwave. Several employees nearly dropped their files. Customers exchanged wide-eyed glances. The security guards straightened instantly. Someone whispered, "His niece." Another murmured, "That's Mr. Essen's family." The shift was immediate, electric, undeniable. Zayden's smug expression faltered, cracking like thin ice under too much pressure. For the first time, he looked unsure, almost frightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Alaya clutched her belly as another wave of pain tightened through her, and Khalid immediately crouched beside her again, shielding her from the stairs. His presence wrapped around her like armor. "I'm here," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with the tenderness of a man who had once promised her mother to protect her always. And now, in front of an entire bank, that promise returned with the force of a storm nobody could stop. Zayden tried to recover his confidence, straightening his jacket as if fabric could cover the panic flickering in his eyes. "This is all a misunderstanding," he began, forcing a laugh that cracked halfway through. She slipped. "She's emotional. Pregnancy does that. We don't need an audience." Khalid didn't even turn his head. "Enough." The single word landed like a hammer. The room quieted instantly, even the printers seemed to stop for a breath. Khalid stood with a calmness more dangerous than shouting, his gaze fixed on Zayden with the precision of a blade. "You raised your voice at her," he said. "You humiliated her. And you dared to lay a hand on her." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "If you attempt to leave this bank," he added, glancing at security, "detain him." 2 guards stepped forward without hesitation. Customers stepped back. Zayden stared in disbelief. "Detain me? Do you know who I am? I'm a CEO. I have influence." Khalid finally looked at him, expression unreadable. "Do you truly believe your influence matters here?" Zayden puffed his chest, desperate. "I can have you fired with one call." A young employee standing nearby leaned to another and whispered loud enough for Zayden to hear, "He doesn't know, does he?" The second employee shook his head slowly. "Mr. Essen isn't just a bank manager. He practically runs the entire financial empire behind this chain. His family to the board. Some say he's richer than the board." The color drained from Zayden's face, slowly, completely, like ink fading from paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since their marriage, Zayden wasn't the most powerful man in the room. He wasn't even close. Alaya's breathing grew uneven, each inhale thinner than the last. The pain in her lower stomach pulsed in small, frightening waves, and she pressed a trembling hand against her belly as if she could shield her baby from everything happening around her. Khalid noticed instantly. His entire body shifted from controlled fury to focused urgency. He knelt beside her again, his presence a steady anchor in the middle of chaos. "Call an ambulance," he ordered, voice calm but carrying the weight of command that made people move without question. A staff member sprinted toward the phone while others hovered anxiously, unsure whether to help or keep their distance. Khalid cupped Alaya's cheek gently. "Look at me, Beta. Breathe with me. Slow and deep." His tone softened only for her, a warmth she hadn't felt in years, the kind that steadied a trembling soul. Her fingers curled around his sleeve, holding tight as another pain rippled through her. "Uncle. I don't want my baby to grow up scared," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. The words were raw, spilling from a place she had kept sealed for too long. Khalid's expression hardened, not at her, but at every memory of what she had endured. "Your child will never know fear," he said, voice low and certain. "Not while I'm here." The paramedics arrived, pushing through the crowd as Khalid guided them with steady clarity. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, he stayed by her side without hesitation, his hand never leaving hers. Everything that mattered was now in motion. And Khalid wasn't letting go. The ambulance doors shut with a hollow thud, and the world outside blurred into flashing lights and muffled noise. Inside, Alaya felt every bump of the road as a reminder of how fragile the moment was. Khalid sat beside her, one hand holding hers firmly, the other giving instructions to the paramedic with the steady precision of a man who had led entire nations of business but was now focused on one life alone. Her breathing wavered again. "I'm scared," she whispered, voice barely stronger than the hum of the ambulance engine. Khalid leaned closer. "Fear has its place, but not here. Not today. You and your child are safe." His certainty wrapped around her like a shield. No one had ever spoken to her with such unwavering belief. The paramedic checked her vitals, reassured by how quickly her condition began to stabilize. "She's responding well," he said. "It's stress-triggered, but we'll get her monitored right away." Khalid nodded. "Good. Keep talking to her. Keep her calm." She watched him as he gave orders, not with arrogance but with duty. He felt like a wall, solid, unmoving, protective. She didn't know whether to cry from relief or grief for all the years she had been alone in moments like this. The ambulance took a sharp turn. Khalid's hand tightened around hers. "Listen to me," he said softly. "No matter what happens next, you are not facing anything alone anymore." Her chest finally loosened. For the first time in months, maybe years, she believed those words. As the ambulance rolled into the hospital entrance, Khalid squeezed her hand once more. "Your new life starts now." The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitoring machines. Alaya lay propped against soft pillows, finally breathing steadily. Doctors had confirmed what Khalid hoped to hear: the baby was safe. She needed rest, protection, and zero stress, 3 things he intended to enforce like law. He stood near the window, speaking to a private doctor he had flown in within 30 minutes. "She gets full observation. 2 nurses. No visitors except me. I don't care what paperwork you need, do it." The doctor nodded quickly, understanding who he was dealing with. Alaya watched him, her heart tight with emotion she didn't have words for. She had always carried pain quietly, like a shadow she had learned to live with. Now someone else was carrying the weight with her, and she didn't know how to process the sudden tenderness. A soft knock came at the door. A nurse stepped in. "Miss Alaya, your tests all look normal. The cramps were stress-induced. Your baby is perfectly fine." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. Khalid approached her bed, his expression softening. "You did well. You held strong." "I didn't feel strong," she admitted. "Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it looks exactly like you." He placed a gentle hand on her head. Something inside her cracked. Not from pain, this time from relief. "Uncle. I thought everything was falling apart. I thought today might be the end." He shook his head. "Today is the beginning. You survived something terrible. And now that I know the truth, I won't let anyone lay a finger on you again." For the first time, she believed safety was real. Not temporary. Not conditional. Real. Khalid stepped out of the room only to make one phone call, but it was the kind that created earthquakes. His voice was low, steady, but sharp enough to cut steel. "I want every camera footage from the bank within the hour," he said. "And freeze the accounts connected to the man named Saad. He harmed my niece." On the other side, his assistant inhaled quickly. "Understood, sir." "That's not all," Khalid continued, pacing down the hallway like a storm brewing in human form. "Start legal proceedings. Assault of a pregnant woman, attempted harm, harassment, financial theft, whatever you can prove, prove it. I want him erased from every position he holds." "Yes, sir. It will be done." Khalid ended the call. The rage in his chest wasn't hot, it was cold, the kind that didn't shout but dismantled worlds silently. He returned to Aleya's room. She was half asleep, exhaustion tugging at her eyes, but she fought to stay awake when she saw him. "You don't have to stay," she murmured. "I'm not leaving," he replied simply. "But, your work. You are my work right now." His tone carried a quiet finality. "Everything else can wait." Her eyes softened. "I don't deserve all this." He sat beside her, shaking his head. "You deserve more than you were ever given. I failed to see your suffering earlier, but now that I know, nothing will hurt you again." She closed her eyes, letting his words settle into the cracked spaces within her. Khalid watched her breathe, calmer now, and made a silent vow. She would never return to pain. Not while he lived. The next morning, Khalid returned with documents tucked under his arm and determination blazing in his eyes. Aleya blinked awake as sunlight spilled across the room. He waited until she sat up before placing the papers gently in her lap. "What's this?" she asked. "Protection," he replied. "And independence." She flipped the first page. Her breath caught. It was a property deed. A fully furnished apartment in a gated community. The kind she used to admire from bus windows but never imagined living in. "Khalid, this is too much." "It's not enough," he said. "You need a home where no one can reach you without consent. A place where you and the baby can breathe." She looked at the next document. A trust fund. Set in her name. With more zeros than she could count. She stared at the numbers as if they were written in another language. "I can't take this." "You can," he said, "because it is yours. Your mother would have wanted you to live without fear or limits. I am only fulfilling what she left behind for you." Her fingers trembled as she held the papers. "I don't know how to accept kindness anymore." "That's why I'm starting small," he said, lips curving into a soft smile. "Today a home. Tomorrow, whatever dream you buried." She swallowed a lump in her throat. "Uncle, why are you doing all this?" "Because family doesn't watch family fall," he answered. "Not in my world." The weight of those words settled deep in her chest. For the first time, she saw a future not shaped by survival, but by possibility. Later that afternoon, when she was strong enough to sit up, Khalid brought her a glass of warm milk and sat beside her. His face gentled as he studied her carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. "You look like someone who has carried too many storms alone," he said quietly. She stared down at her hands. "I didn't want to bother anyone. I thought pain was normal." "Pain is common," he corrected softly, "but never normal." Her eyes welled up again. "I feel like I'm breaking apart." He placed a comforting hand over hers. "You're not breaking. You're healing. And healing hurts." She took a shaky breath. "I keep thinking about the bank. The way he pushed me. The fear. I can't forget it." "You don't need to forget it," he said. "You only need to remember that you survived it. And now you're not the same woman who walked into that building." "And who am I now?" "Someone with a future," he said. "Someone with power beside her. Someone who will never be small again." She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, trying to hold in the emotion rising like a tide. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You're pregnant, standing after facing violence, speaking after years of silence. Tell me again that you aren't strong." His words wrapped around her like a warm cloak. For the first time, she didn't feel like fragile glass. She felt like something rebuilding itself with golden seams. And Khalid watched her with pride growing in his eyes. By the time the sun began to set, Aleya was sitting comfortably with food on a tray and soft blankets tucked around her. Khalid entered with a final stack of documents, though this pile looked different, heavier, more official. She tilted her head with quiet curiosity. "What now?" she asked. "Justice," he replied. She straightened instinctively, nerves flickering in her eyes. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "These are legal charges we're filing against Saad. All you need to do is read and sign when you're ready." She took a slow breath and reached for the top file. As she skimmed through it, she froze. Attempted assault. Endangerment of a pregnant woman. Fraud. Coercion. Emotional abuse. Physical harm. Her entire body felt warm with both shock and something fierce rising inside her. This is everything he did. And everything he tried to hide, Khalid added. But people will think I'm making a scene. Let them think, he replied. Truth stands whether people like it or not. Her eyes softened with gratitude. I never imagined someone would fight for me. You don't need to imagine it anymore. She signed the papers slowly, each signature feeling like a small piece of her freedom settling into place. When she finished, she exhaled long and deep, as if releasing years of silence. Khalid took the signed documents, but instead of standing, he sat again and looked at her with an almost fatherly expression. You know, he began, your mother once told me that you would grow into a woman with a gentle heart but unbreakable strength. Today, I saw exactly what she meant. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time they carried relief, not despair. I wish she were here. She is, Khalid said, touching her shoulder softly. In the strength you showed today. In the child you're carrying. In the kindness you still have, even after everything. She closed her eyes, letting the moment settle like calm water. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel broken. She felt rebuilt. Supported. Protected. And ready for whatever came next.